I wonder if we're live. I wonder if it's going to tell us if we're live either.
It says it in the top corner that it's projecting to YouTube, but I'm refreshing. I'll let you know when it's live.
Okay.
You're on
It
you're
says
on
it in the
YouTube.
top. We're live. We are live. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome in. Welcome in. Welcome to our virtual audience, guys. We're so happy to have you. We'll give everybody a moment to settle in. As we're waiting, if you are in our virtual audience, why don't you let us know where you're joining us from in the chat? Louisville, 502. Cincinnati. Hello. Okay, from Philly, Cincinnati, Woodlawn, Atlanta. Okay. Cincy. I think we got 513 in the house. We'll give it a couple more seconds for everybody to join us, and then we will get started, guys. All right. I hope everyone's doing well this morning. Fort Washington, Maryland. New Orleans. Okay. We are all over the place. We have some representation from across the country. I love it. All right. Let's see. A couple of us are still trying to join our virtual audience. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome. All right, we have someone from DC. Shout out to Dr. Green. Welcome. Okay, I'm gonna try my best to keep us at time. It is Saturday morning. Happy Women's History Month. We're still celebrating Black history over here. Welcome everyone to State of Black Girlhood. I'm so excited to have you guys here today. I wonder if we're live. I wonder if it's going to tell us if we're live either. What was that?
It says it in the top corner that it's projecting to YouTube, but I'm refreshing. I'll let you know when it's live.
Okay. Maybe that's me, guys. Sorry. We're all right. Let's see. I'm having some difficulties. Oh my God. All right, hopefully you guys couldn't hear that. But anyways, welcome to State of Black Girlhood. I'm so excited to have you all here. This event wouldn't be made possible if it weren't for our partner. So I just want to do a quick shout out to Black Women Cultivating Change. And obviously with the generous donation from Interact for Health. So thank you guys so much. My name is Ashley Phelps. I am the founder and the author of Girlhood Explained, a movement dedicated to ensuring girls and their caregivers have the resources, the community, and advocacy tools needed in order to thrive, ultimately creating a better reality for our girls. So we created this series because it's time to talk, really talk about the realities our girls face every single day in education, in wellness, in leadership, in advocacy, in economic development, and personal development. So for me, the statistics are kind of disgusting. It's There are stories that are still all too familiar, and the stakes are too high in order for us to sit in silence in 2025. So this isn't just a conversation. I plan for this to be a movement. We are here to center Black girls, not just in research and policy, but in everyday decisions that ultimately impact their lives. So before we get started, I want to touch on a few things. We encourage engagement. So drop in the chat and let us know how happy you are to be here, and give our student co-hosts some words of encouragement before we get started. Thank you for those that are joining us via Zoom, and then also those that are joining us via YouTube. We are so appreciative for your support, and thank you for showing up for the conversation. We only have a short time together here today, but I want to pass the mic to the reason why we're here, our student co-hosts, because this isn't just about me or even about the incredible experts on our panel today. It is about them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves before we get started in our first panel. Ms. Zoe Jenkins, can I pass it over to you?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Zoe Jenkins, and I'm a fourth grader. I love animals, and I'm exploring my interests in piano, karate, and tennis. I also really love to read, and one day I hope to study more about marine biology because my favorite animal is the killer whale. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation because girls like me have a lot to say about what we see and experience every day. I know so many girls who are smart, talented, and creative, but still don't always get the opportunities they deserve. So I'm happy we get to have this discussion today. Now I'll pass it to Cherish to introduce herself.
Thank you, Zoe, and hi, everyone. My name is Cherish Johnson. I am a ninth grader at Warner Hills High School. I've been a straight A student for 9 years, and I love helping people. I actually started my own lash tech business. I love skincare and making my own body scrubs. I feel like taking care of the skin is very important. And I'm a part of the Black Culture Club and on my school's dance team. I want to be a doctor or a therapist when I grow up, so I know how important it is to have access to education, healthcare, and safe spaces to be ourselves. And that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this event, to talk about how we can support girls like me in every area of life. So, let's get started. I'm so honored to help lead today's conversation. Our first panel is about acknowledging the barriers, the challenges Black girls face in schools, from discipline policies to wellness support, and what we can do to change the system. Right now, I'm going to introduce our panelists. First up is Ms. Kelsi Goins. She is an executive director, professional development, and community impact at University of Cincinnati. Kelsi Goins is a trailblazer in education and leadership development, dedicated to expanding opportunities for historically underrepresented students. As the executive director of professional development and community impact at the University of Cincinnati, she focuses on creating equitable pathways for young leaders to pursue STEM and higher education and supporting them in their leadership journeys. Kelsi is passionate about bridging the gaps between academic, industry, and community impact, ensuring that young Black women have access to mentorship, resources, and career development through her position as Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls Appointment. Let's show her some love in the chat. So next up, we have future Dr. Vanity Jenkins, who is a dedicated equity strategist and founder of Shift Ed Consulting, a firm committed to dismantling anti-Blackness in education and workspaces. With extensive experience in organizational leadership and culturally responsive pedagogy, Vanity works on institutions to challenge systematic racism and create environments where Black students, especially Black girls, can thrive. And as a mother to our own very student co-host, Zoe, she brings both a professional and deeply personal perspective on why this work is so urgent. So let's also show her some love in the chat. And next up, we have Miss Stephanie Wilson, who is a SPED educator and holistic wellness advocate. Stephanie Wilson is an educator, mentor, and advocate working at the intersection of special education and holistic wellness. With years of experience in supporting neurodivergent and exceptional Black girls, she understands firsthand how systemic barriers in educational impact students of color. Stephanie is also passionate about centering joy, healing, and culturally responsive teaching practices in school. So let's also show her some love in the chat and let's get into our discussion. So the discussion questions are, what systemic barriers impact Black girls most in your area of expertise?
I can jump in and get us started. I think one, thank you, Ashley, for curating this panel and helping us talk about some of the barriers that are impacting Black girls. I think a lot of times when we think about education, we've heard statistics about suspension rates, and a lot of times that focuses on Black boys, which is important. And Black girls are one of the largest growing populations in terms of students who are being suspended and expelled. And so definitely think that they need to be a part of the conversation too. We also know that this is happening both at the systemic and the individual level. When I coach teachers, one of the things I always tell them is that teachers are the first stop on the school to prison pipeline, and your decision or choice to write a student up can have lasting impacts on what happens to them in school. And a lot of times when we look at the data and look at what Black girls in particular are being written up for, it's things like insubordination or quote unquote attitude, these really intangible things that could be just differences in culture. And so I think that that's really important for us to name both that this is happening at a systemic level, but also that it's happening at an individual level. And we also see the way that just girls are treated in classrooms by individual teachers. One of the things that I look for, especially in elementary schools, are there books that represent Black girls? When teachers call students to the carpet, are they calling Black girls pretty and beautiful? Are they affirming them in their identity and who they are and how they show up? Are they touching their hair? Zoe has already had experiences with white folks commenting on or touching her hair at a very early age. And all of those things impact Black girls' self-esteem, the extent to which they like coming to school or want to come to school. And then, I'm an introvert. My daughter is also an introvert. And the way that Black girl introverts are treated in the workplace really mirrors what we see happening in education when they aren't, wanting to be friends with everybody or just wanting some time alone. Again, that can be seen as attitude or insubordination. And so I think we really need to talk about how things are impacting girls at the individual, interpersonal, and systemic level in schools, because like I mentioned, and there are lots of other things, but also want to make space for other panelists. Those are some of the things that I kind of typically see when working in education.
I can add to that as well. So thank you, Vanity, for providing that. And just to provide some stats. So from 2017 to 2018, 40% of our out-of-school suspensions were with girls, specifically Black girls. So 37% of them being in-school suspensions, and then 43% of the expulsions for actions as Vanity stated. So we see this from a college perspective, right? We're seeing Black girls are already at a disadvantage because they've been out of school, which then affects their grades, which then it's like, oh, how do you even apply into a university when you're failing because of your grades, because of your suspensions? And also wanting to point out as well of Black girls don't always have the same access access to education as well. So looking at just schools within the Cincinnati area, I work in the College of Engineering. We want more women in STEM, but you don't offer chemistry. So we're not even giving our students the bare necessities to even be able to migrate, I guess, into college.
It took me so long to find the unmute button, but to piggyback off of what the other two panelists said, especially when Vanity was talking about how we show up, how teachers are that first line of in between, home and school. So I'm a special education teacher and I'm at the pre-K level. So I really want, all of my students to feel loved and welcome, but especially my Black girls, because when I see them, I see me. And it's important, like Vanity said, to empower them when they come to school and to choose them and to give them a voice. And, I make it a point in my classroom that all feelings are welcomed, nothing is judged. If you are having an off day, if you're feeling upset, like, you are allowed to feel that. You don't have to mask, you don't have to present yourself in a way that isn't authentic to you in that moment. And it's important that they feel safe in order to do that. And when she was talking about their hair, I think, we definitely need to acknowledge how they come presented. But if your hair is not slicked back, if your edges aren't, laid, for me, that's when I'm going to make it a point to even tell you you're beautiful, and not just say, oh, you're beautiful because of, it's just like, oh, you look beautiful today. And to have them feel safe in the classroom, but then also build that rapport with their parents. Because if there is an incident, well, hey, there's a pattern and I see something, I want their parents to know that I want to reach out to you when things are going great, when we have stuff to celebrate. But then if there's something that I notice that, hey, let's build that partnership so that they're not always hearing negative things about their child. That they're also hearing like, hey, they're doing great in this. They're excelling in this area. And at my age, at the grade level that I teach, I really want them to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to enjoy school, because this is the beginning of their career in the school setting. And I don't want it to be tainted by um, any shortcomings on my end, or once they leave my classroom and go to someone who doesn't look like me, they have that foundation of, okay, I know what it feels like to be loved in school. So if I feel anything less than that, I'm equipped with the background knowledge of what it should feel like.
Thank you. The next question is, what policies or systemic factors shape the trajectory of Black girlhood?
I can jump in here again. I think one of the things that we can really look at there is I believe it's called the CARE Act, which is something that has been trying to get passed for a while that would basically eliminate discrimination based on hair. We know as recent as the 90s, there were policies at different organizations where you couldn't wear braids, or you couldn't, have an afro. You couldn't have some of the styles that are kind of natural to Black girls. I think that is one national policy that could be really beneficial to Black girls. There have been incidents that have been blown up in the media. I remember one that just completely broke my heart, where a white teacher cut off a Black girl's braids because she had beads on them and was making too much noise in class. And I can't imagine the trauma that that little girl and her family suffered because of that. So I think that's one like tangible policy that we could be looking to support to ensure that our students can just show up as themselves, right? And there have been cases where similar things have impacted Black boys with locks or with braids. I also think that kind of generally, we really do need to look at how we are training educators. The vast majority of teachers in public K-12 settings are white women. And so there is a cultural difference. I know DEI has become the new N word, and people don't want to talk about it. As a DEI strategist, I can confidently say critical race theory was never being taught in any public K-12 school. If it were, we probably would not have the statistics that Kelsi shared with us, because the crux of critical race theory is really to help people understand how racism has impacted our systems and what we can do to combat that racism. And so I do believe in culturally relevant pedagogy, in education, in anything that is really working for students. That is something that should be a policy shift. Teachers should be culturally relevant. They should understand their students' background. I also think curriculum is a place where we have seen huge shifts and changes over the last 4 or 5 years, but even more broadly, the last 10 to 15 years, where students are not even having representation of themselves in books, like board books. I know you teach pre-K, but there are some schools where there are no board books that have representation of Black girls in them. And I think, again, that is just really important. Students need to see themselves. They need to see themselves in the curriculum. And so I think those are just a couple of ways where we can see some policy shifts at the local level. So, going to school board meetings is really important. My daughter goes to private school, but I still go to the school board meetings for the public school in our area because everybody is our child, right? And we need to support what is happening in public school, even though that is not the choice that I am making at the current moment for my child. But going to school board meetings is important. Figuring out how decisions are made at the state level is also very important. That's where a lot of policy shifts happen. And then the national level is important. I don't think that is a way for us to fight right now, just given all of the chaos. And so I'm really encouraging people to look specifically at school board elections. I know here in South Carolina, there are a couple of districts that have been taken over by Moms for Liberty, which is a super right-wing group that have, gotten people to run and get seats on the school board. And they have been enacting policies that are really challenging and damaging for Black students. And so my immediate response to folks is start local, go to your school board meetings, understand how money is being spent, understand what the school board is prioritizing and how that is impacting our kids.
Thank you so much, Vanity. I think we want to continue asking and, wondering additional ways in which we can disrupt the system and education and that ultimately disproportionately impact Black girls. So Kelsi and Stephanie, do you want to also add your thoughts?
Similar to what Vanity said, I can speak on something that Hamilton County has done in the recent years with the Women and Girls Commission. So in 2020, we created a county assessment center. So to also ensure that obviously Black girls weren't just going to be a part of the system based off of suspensions that have happened, because we do know too, to go back to our last point, that suspensions lead into, again, as Vanity said, the school to prison pipeline. And while creating that system, they have seen a tremendous change of women actually entering into, or girls entering into the juvenile center, but they're also working on other ways as well. So in Hawaii, they host a girls' court, right? Which has been incredibly fruitful for the girls that are in Hawaii. And so we'll be seeing that playing out in a few months or so within the Hamilton County courts as well. So policy reform is huge, even as Vanity said, again, to reiterate, like not just within school boards, but also at your county levels. Going to your state of county addresses is incredibly important. Being a part of, for folks that are in Cincinnati, join the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls and really be a part of the change in the policy that will be brought forth, because we've been Black girls and we are their best advocates in this current moment. And I would not even say, we can't even challenge the federal level right now because we're doomed with them.
We have some advocacy people on the call, so we'll talk to them about their thoughts. I think you're just you're teeing them up perfectly. Tamaya, I see you, and Carla, I see you too. But go ahead.
Yeah, I at the in my opinion, the very ground roots level is showing up at your school. Let your teachers see your face. Let them know that you are an active role in their life and that that you're their point person. Because I think so many times parents aren't empowered in knowing that just their presence is impactful, so that your principal sees your face, your student's classroom teacher, they know who you are. Because some of our white moms, they're showing up to the PTO meetings and they're getting their I work in a diverse school district. I'm in Montgomery County, but the voices that are heard are those who are louder, and they tend to be white. And so when our parents show up and when our parents advocate, it's heard. And we recently, it was like 2 days ago, had a Black History Month performance, and it was great. And before that, like right before, our principal got a letter from a parent who was upset that the fist was used in the imagery, and was talking about how it is a sign of resistance and a sign of protest and just all these negative connotations. And our principal is Black and our vice principal is Hispanic. And so just knowing how when we're trying to uplift our students in a loud and a positive way, how it still can be seen as something that is negative and too aggressive and too much. And so when we show up and when we are present, like, some people may be intimidated, but it is also empowering to our young girls. And they need to see that, because it then gives them that voice that they can have in the classroom when they're the only or the other, or when they're on the playground and they don't necessarily see someone who looks like them, or they do, they're now able to represent themselves and bring themselves in a way that they've seen them, they're able to articulate their feelings and who they are in a way that they've been able to see others do it. So I think we as parents hold a lot of power when we show up and show face.
Awesome, Cherish. Would you like to push us forward?
Yeah. Okay. The next question is, what role does mental and emotional wellness play in academic success?
All of it. It's so important. When I tell you, these babies have feelings. And I mean, yes, we're teaching them how to count, letter identification, but they really need to learn and understand their emotions and how to self-regulate, and how to recognize when something doesn't feel good and doesn't feel right, and how to advocate that. Because I have young kids. Everything, they'll come to me and say, so and so did this, and I listen, I empower them. I'm like, okay, now you tell them. Like, I want to empower you to speak to the person directly, so that you can, work that muscle. But if you don't feel good, if you're hungry, if you're tired, if something's going on at home, it's hard to come then sit down and learn. So I think as teachers, again, as I empower parents, I tell teachers, and I remind myself, take that time, sit with your student, and get on their level and see what's wrong. And if they can't tell you, have them show you, have them express it in some way that feels comfortable to them, because you can't expect a child to be with you 8 hours of the day and not feel safe, and take tests and do well if you're not a safe space for them. So just I'm such a advocate for mental health in the school system, for times of peace. We do yoga in class, we stretch in class, we're teaching meditation, just so that they know that their body is safe, and wherever they are safe in their body.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. And I hope that we get to a place where all teachers have that approach. This question is really important to me because I grew up in the generation where, we were told you have to be twice as good to get half as much. And perfectionism was the goal in my household. And so, I remember being really upset if I didn't have an A, and like putting all of this pressure on me. And now a lot of the work that I do is helping grown adult women learn how to get regulated, and understand that they don't have to put those pressures on themselves, et cetera. And so when I think about Black girls, that is not something that I want for my daughter. And even though, I tell her, as long as you try your best, I don't care if you get a 40, we're gonna celebrate. We're gonna go out and celebrate if you did your best. she has still absorbed perfectionism. And so she still thinks that she has to get A's. She still thinks that, you know, if it's not a 100, she doesn't deserve, or she's not worthy. And so that's something that I'm really trying to help her unpack, because it leads to anxiety. And, you know, I had high functioning anxiety for my entire life, wasn't diagnosed with it until I was 36, and realized this is why I always have an attitude, or this is why I'm always so angry, because I'm actually very anxious because of the way I was raised. I'm the eldest daughter as well. So that is another layer of perfectionism. And so knowing that I have had to unlearn these things, I'm trying with just on the one-on-one, right, with trying to help my daughter learn how to be self-regulated. But because she spends so much time at school, if that message isn't mirroring what I'm saying at school or what her teacher is saying, then she's like, Mom, you're tripping. I do have to get an A, you know, or Mom, no, it has to be, you know, this level of work. And so I really want for us to take mental health more seriously, and not just take it as, you know, going to get your nails done or going to buy something when you're sad, but how do you actually identify your emotions? There are so many adults who can't identify their emotions, right? How do you know what you're actually feeling? How do you know why you're feeling that? And then what are some strategies that you can do to release that energy if it is negative? You know, there was a report that came out last year saying that women have more autoimmune deficiencies because we hold in our anger. And so that's also something that I'm working on her with. When somebody makes you angry at school, you don't have to just swallow it. Talk to them. Now, you know, children don't always know how to do that well. And so you can't go and just push them, but you should be able to talk or to journal or to tell a trusted adult. How do you get that emotion out? You know, I tell her to go in the bathroom and wiggle when she is, you know, bored or just has been doing too much work. We also put a lot of work on children. And, you know, she's not in middle school yet, but I was talking to a group of middle school teachers about their expectations for children. And I'm like, you know, they go to 5 different classes. Every teacher has a different expectation. You can have pens here, you can have pencils there. You know, you have to turn in your homework first in this class. You don't turn it in until later in another class. And I just asked them to imagine, what if you had to report to 5 different people every day, and each of those 5 people had different expectations for you? As an adult, that would be hard to navigate. But we expect middle schoolers who are already going through so many different emotions to do this day in and day out. It is just a very unfair expectation. You know, similarly, I have been at schools where if you're late, you don't get to eat. And at those same schools, I have seen teachers come to staff meetings late and go get food first, right? And so we have to stop expecting for children to have these high, you know, astronomical expectations of excellence, things that we don't even hold ourselves to. They are still learning how to be humans. They are learning everything. I homeschooled her for kindergarten. Homeschooling is not for me whatsoever. But I realized in doing that, you really, like, you're teaching them everything. They don't know how to do any, like, I'm like, well, what am I going to teach today? You don't know this, you don't know that. And so we just put so much expectations on children, and we don't have those same expectations for ourselves as adults. And I just don't think that's fair. And I think we need to model wellness in schools and allow kids to have times for breaks and have time to regulate their emotions, talk about their emotions. What made you upset about what just happened? Let's talk about it, so that we can have more emotionally regulated adults as well.
Agree with all that you all have both of what you've said, but I also want to just point out some statistics as well. So from 2001 to 2017, suicide death rates for Black girls increased 182%, right? Knowing that obviously this is stemming from mental health issues, and oftentimes seeing that within the classroom of not having safe spaces. And so from the college side, where I'm working with girls becoming women, and we're seeing safe spaces being dismantled, right? With eliminating DEI or whatever the president's trying to do. But I just want to hold that Black girls with depression or even mental health aren't even given the freedom or leniency that our white girls are given, right? So like if we are having any anxiety or depression or any of that, it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't exist for you. You're fine. You're strong. So building wellness within the curriculum, starting at really in kindergarten, I would say, well, probably earlier, but within kindergarten, and then letting that go. So then when students get to college, it's like, hey, I have the tools to self-regulate, because therapy might not be an option to me, right? And within our community, we still know and realize like therapy is not, okay, it's there, it's a tool, but like, no, we're not going to go to therapy. You can pray about it. At least that's the generation that I've grown up in. And thankfully, within my own family, though, therapy has always been a thing. Um, but I think it's incredibly important to obviously know how to cope and have those wellness skills. So then when you are in college and you are in a crisis, because as you said, Vanity, for engineers, they're taking 18 credit hours in their first year, right? With expectations from professors that might not be, their national citizenship might not be, or national origin might not be American. So their expectations are different. And also your first year of college, is the biggest adjustment of your life. And so not having skills or tools to really navigate that sets them back, or sets Black girls back so far. I see it every single day. And I wish it's like, okay, so how do we go back even to ninth grade to just instill wellness within you, so that you do know how to deal with this professor who's provided you with a microaggression, or is giving you all of this work and is expecting you to know how to code, and this is the first time you're seeing coding.
I want to just add one more thing to what Kelsi said, because, like we talked about in the previous question, it's the systemic and the individual level, right? And so when Black girls get to a place like engineering where they are not expected to be there, right? We also often internalize that. And so think that we have to outperform or put more pressure on ourselves to outperform, while we have individual teachers who are harder on us because they don't think that we should be there to begin with. And so it's a double-edged sword that we are constantly combating. And not only at the collegiate level, the same thing happens. I remember being one of few in AP or honors classes or advanced math, and just what that does to your psyche when you see all of your friends in other classes, but you are in these classes. And one of my favorite TED Talks is Miss Rita, who talks about, kids can't learn from people who they don't like. And that was 100% me. When I didn't like you as a teacher, I was like, I don't want to do anything in your class. It doesn't matter to me. And so also, again, going back to that teacher education and making sure that teachers can communicate cross-culturally and that they understand different cultural nuances.
And this is the last question before we transition to our next panel. How do we equip educators to create spaces where Black girls feel seen, valued, and supported?
She's so sweet. She missed the part that said quickly. Quickly. That question, so I'll say it for her.
I think first it starts with better vetting practices. I also think that it starts within colleges, right? How are we, as institutions and as the academy, providing teachers with the strategies and the tools, and including, I mean, implicit bias and training is great and all, but like it's still, privilege still sneaks up on people, right? And oftentimes, and it can sneak up on people that are Black and brown as well. But better vetting processes for sure. And ensuring that, again, we do have culturally competent folks in these spaces, right? Like I don't want a racist person teaching my kid, period, but I also know that we are in this world right now where that is also still a very large reality.
I agree with what Kelsi named. I also think, culturally relevant pedagogy has been a discipline for 30 plus years. And people are just talking about it now, but it has been a proven time and time again, a proven discipline that supports learning and growth for all students. I think that every college and university that has an education program, it should be rooted in culturally relevant pedagogy, period. It shouldn't be optional. It shouldn't be an elective. That is what the program should be centered on, because all students do better when you have a culturally competent teacher. I also think, of course, I'm a former educator, so I'm gonna say we need to raise teacher pay. I think that is also a huge part of what we see happening. You can't necessarily require people to go above and beyond when you are paying them pennies. So I always think that that is an important part of the conversation. And finally, we really need for people to love Black girls. We need people to love Blackness, period. And we need people to understand, again, at the individual level, how your choices and decisions are impacting people's experience in schools. And so I'll leave it there since Ashley said.
Yeah, I agree with what both of the other panelists said. Like loving our Black girls, loving our Blackness, and the nuances of it. Because a student who is, African American looks different and feels different when they go home than a student who just came from Ethiopia, who just immigrated here. So I think just again knowing your students, being aware that even though we're all identified as Black, there is a nuance. We all have different cultures. We all have different, differences that should be celebrated and not just grouped in together, because we're not monolithic. And I think that, continuing education, like teachers should love what they do. And if they don't, get out. Like, it's time to go. So just like you said, the vetting process, having people who want to be there in the school system, and those who don't, get your retirement and leave, because there's no space for that. And I think Black girls deserve the best, and they are worthy of the best. So that's, as educators, is what we should give them.
I also want to throw in one last thing too. I think too that we need to hold teachers that are racist, and where we see they're not valuing Black girls, we need to hold them in shame, right? So I want to do one caveat as well of like Title VI, no matter what happens, is still a thing. We need to report these people so that they are not continuing in these spaces with our girls. And that's all.
Thank you so much for our panelists for your expertise. Let's show them some love in the chat. But I'm going to pass it over to Zoe to get us started with our next panel discussion.
Let's give it up for Cherish. Our second panel is about advocacy and leadership. How Black girls experience leadership, community, and advocacy across different spaces. Our next panelists are Ms. Carlin Crawley, Chief of Staff, Philadelphia's 7th Councilman District. Ms. Carolyn Crawley is a policy expert and civic leader with a passion for ensuring girls and women are represented in government leadership and advocacy spaces. As the Chief of Staff, Carlin directs legislative initiatives, community engagement efforts, and strategic communications to drive impactful change. With a background in program management, civic engagement, and public policy, Carlin is committed to supporting her community. Let's show her some love in the chat. Our next panelist is Ms. Tamaya Dennard, Represent Women Program Manager and former Cincinnati City Council member. Ms. Tamaya Dennard is a seasoned political strategist, policy advocate, and former Cincinnati City Council member who has spent her career fighting for equity, representation, and systemic change. Known for her bold leadership in public service, Tamaya was a driving force behind progressive policies that supported youth, women, and marginalized communities. She now works with Represent Women focusing on increasing the representation of women in leadership and ensuring that girls and young women are prepared, empowered, and supported in civic and political spaces. Let's show her some love in the chat and let's get into the questions. Our first question is, what systemic barriers impact Black girls most in your area of expertise?
I'm happy to go first. I am based in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the sixth largest city in America, and it's also America's poorest large city. It's a very Black city, and a very diverse city. So the district that I represent is actually 56% Latino. So in a lot of the rooms that I'm in, I'm talking about both Black and brown girls. And how we can improve outcomes for them. So when I think about systemic policies, what I really want to talk about on a human level is root cause, right? How did we get where we are right now? Trying to solve problems in a poor city or an under-resourced city is like trying to untangle a wet knot. It is so difficult. You pull one string and you think that you're solving one issue and you find 10 others. And what I have found is that sometimes resources are limited, political will is limited to be able to get down to the root cause of what that issue is. At some point, we're going to have to get back all the way back to the basics so that we can look at the state of Black girlhood. Where are we right now? How do we get here? And how do we kind of start to work on some of those root cause issues so that we can improve outcomes in the future? And that requires a lot of conversation because we really have to define collectively what success means for us. It could be just professional success and figuring out how to improve our financial situation, but we cannot ignore all of the trauma that we've experienced in our past and our emotional well-being and our mental health in the process. And that, especially in an under-resourced city, which is the city that I serve, that is very difficult for our leaders to figure out. But at some point, if we want to truly change the landscape of what it means to be a Black girl and eventually a Black woman in this country, that's what it will take.
For sure. And thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. So good to be with all of you. And I think, Carlin, you hit the nail on the head. I think being under-resourced is worse than being not resourced at all. And that's what a lot of us face in the space. We'll get crumbs compared to what at problems that we suffer from or we battle with systemically, and it puts us further behind than we were in the beginning. Also, tokenism is problematic for us in that they'll give us false seats at the table, or they'll ask us to come to the table after decisions have already been made, and that's terrible. Also, the wealth gap is really horrible. So for so many Black women, once they determine, to your point, Carlin, once they say this is success, and then once we get to that space, then they move the goal line, and they do that constantly with Black women. So it was like, first was like, you got it. This is the thing you have to do. And then being the people that we are, we do it. And then, oh no, we were no, that's not the goal line. This is the goal line. So at first it was like, you got to have an education. Black women are by far the most educated people on this planet. So once we, met that barometer, then they move to something else. Now they caricature our education and they make a mockery of it. So there's so many things that are happening, not to mention the people who are making decisions on policies not having the shared experience that we have. And so policies don't reflect our true experiences. So that's just, I mean, root cause is it's so hard for them to tackle, because in order for white people to really talk about the root causes, it makes they have their evil has to be addressed. And I used to work at, shout out to Dr. Webb, I used to work at Design Impact, and we used to always say, you can't address concentrated poverty until you're willing to address concentrated wealth. And that's the case with a lot of problems in this country.
Okay. Next question. What policies or systemic factors shape the trajectory of Black girlhood?
Yep, I actually want to pivot that question a little bit and build on something that Tamaya shared about once we become decision makers, right? How are we supposed to navigate those situations? You may be in a lot of situations where you may be the only one in the room, the only woman, the only African American in the room. And we know from our lived experience what our community is facing. So I guess what I want to underscore in that question is once you get in that space, and when we talk about, working on our mental health and working on our confidence and working on, knowing who we are and our values and our morals, because when you get in that room, you can't care what people think. You're going to be in a lot of situations where people will gaslight you out of knowing what you have experienced is a real issue. And I think that is very difficult because you now are balancing putting your community on your back and your own success. You're battling, all of these opinions in the room. And sometimes it's as simple as that. That can be the barrier. That is the barrier to moving the needle forward. If you are strong, you're confident, you know where you stand, you know what your principles are, and you know what you're fighting for and who you're fighting for, you can move the needle forward because it's you start making people uncomfortable at that point, and they understand that you're not budging and that there's going to have to be a shift. And so before you get to that point, you yourself need to be informed, not only anecdotally, understanding what your experience is, understanding what the data says, what the latest policy analysis is telling you, so that you can bridge those together for the betterment of your community. And so, we're going to be our own solution. Black women are going to be our own solution. And so the better we are equipped with information, but also with mental and emotional health, the better fighters we can be once we walk through those doors.
For sure. I'm a quotes person, so if you spend time with me, you know that. But one of my favorite quotes is by Sada Shakur. And she said, being a warrior and being a struggler has been forced on me by my oppression. Otherwise, I would have been free to be so much more. And that's the calling card for so many Black women. We are plugged into systems and places that don't take our experience into account. And that's part of the challenge. And in terms of changing the trajectory of what is possible for us. So, I mean, when I was talking about and I know we'll talk a little bit about like policy, but the challenge for us is to be able to show up. We're not allowed to show up as our full selves. And when we get somebody who we have to like lean into like this, and allyship is a whole nother conversation, and privilege and leverage and privilege, but recognizing like in the spaces where we might be the only voice, things are going to happen, and being able to have support, because it takes a lot to be that person. When I was on city council, I don't know if you all have played basketball, but I used to be a basketball player when I was growing up, and I would go to council some days and I just say, I'm gonna take the defense off today. I don't want to play defense today. Like, it's not a good thing to do, but I was like, I'm tired. But then somebody would say something stupid, and then I look around and I say, if I don't say something, nobody else is gonna say something. You know what I mean? And it gets exhausting being the only one. So having people to support you when you are being that voice and being the only person in the room, I can't speak to that enough.
Thank you for your answers. And let's go on to the next question. What does true representation look like for Black girls in leadership?
I think that speaks to exactly what I was saying before about not being afraid and not allowing people to gaslight you out of riding for your community. At the end of the day, we have to embrace the fact that we may be the only one that's willing to say it. We may be the only one that's willing to go that extra mile. But don't let anybody move you off your square. We have, when we get into these spaces, we have that unique opportunity and we want to capitalize on it. The council member that I work for always says, you know, what keeps her up at night is the fact that in 20 years, there are going to be adults who were children when she was a council person. And she never wants them to say, you had the opportunity to change my community, to make a difference here, and you failed to do it. You know, so how can we make it, you know, safer, better, cleaner? How can we, you know, really just improve the day-to-day experience for the communities that we serve? It is exhausting. I work for that council member that's the one that's absolutely gonna say it. And it's exhausting, right? And it's intimidating. Here we are, we're in our freshman term. This is our first full term. And you know, my boss is often the one that's leading the charge. We represent the Kensington neighborhood, which is home to the largest opioid open air drug market on the East Coast. And the experiences of our neighbors that we serve there are insurmountable. There are horrible things happening in that community on a day-to-day basis. And despite that, there are people who are telling us that, you know, you shouldn't be focusing on cleaning up those streets. You need to have compassion for the folks that are unfortunately affecting quality of life in a negative way. And we have to challenge that, right? We have to say there has to be a way to have compassion for both populations. There has to be a way that we can figure out how to prioritize these poor Black and brown people that are living in this neighborhood, we expect them to pay their property taxes. We expect them to pay their wage taxes. We expect them to behave. We expect them to not be violent. We expect them not to protest. But how are we really representing them? Are we giving them their fair shake? And sometimes that takes a fight because not everybody is going to understand and have the same priorities that we do. And you just have to not care and keep going anyway.
You have to not care, and you also have to trust yourself. And that's really important, because a lot of times, like when you look at policy, or well, I just, white people, they project onto us what they feel policy should look like. So, and white people have generally historically taken a very binary approach to policy. So I appreciate your council person, Carlin, because it's both ends. It's a very nuanced. You can care about your community and do these things, and I'm just being honest. That's all I know how to be. White people don't know how to do that. And so it's on us to be able to do that. At the same time, I also want, and I love the space that Black women are in right now, because the one thing about us is like, and the one thing about being a Black woman is they demonize us and emulate us at the same time. It's a very precarious space to be in as a Black woman. You've tossed us aside, but you want us to save you at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very weird space for us to be in. And I really appreciate where we are mentally, for the most part. I mean, it's a struggle, and we should take our time and our mental rest and our breaks as we need to. But I really love, like, until we get out in those streets, and white folks ain't about to get out in them streets, and I'm not going to do it. You know what I mean? So part of it is being a warrior in spurts. And at first I used to think I had to be a warrior all the time. And now I understand, like, I got to be a warrior in spurts. I got to protect my own peace. And I think that's one thing that, whether you're, chairs, whether you're in ninth grade, whether you are, in an adult, whether you're, pushing 50 like me, all Black women need to learn how to um, protect our peace and not try to save the world, because that type of mentality has been passed on to us. It has very much historical implications. And so I love the evolution of where we are right now as Black women. Just continue to support one another and uplift one another, and recognize that we could do a lot, but we can't do everything, and that's okay.
Thank you for your answers. And let's move on to the last question. How do we ensure young Black girls know their voices matter in decision-making spaces?
I'm going to start off with education. I know that schools don't teach civics anymore, but we can be empowered with the information that we go out of our way to get out to our communities. Um, do you know why you need to call your city council person versus why you would call your state rep or your state senator or your congressperson or your US senator? Um, how can you build relationships with the electeds and the policymakers that can help you? So I'm gonna say my answer is two things, is education and its relationships. Making sure that you not only know yourself, where you stand, but how do you work the system for your benefit, right? And when I say your benefit, I mean the benefit of like the community, our collective here. There is so much that can happen when you know how the system works. There is a woman here that I admire so much. I met her the first year that I moved here to Philadelphia, and she's everybody's grandma. And this is not a woman that she could very well be a lobbyist and be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she is the rec leader in her community. And I remember when one of the universities here wanted to build a new stadium that she felt like was going to be detrimental to her neighborhood. But because she knew what she had in her power to do, and she knew the people that could move the pieces around the board to make it happen, she went up against a major university here and blocked the funding for the project. People were so angry because here are all these wealthy developers and all of these very heavy hitters that are interested in this project, and here comes Miss Ruth, and she said I didn't want it here. And that was that on that. We can use that model, right? If you know where the money is. First of all, everybody should know this, that a city budget is a moral document. If you want to see where a municipality's priorities are, look at where they're putting the money. And she knew to do that. And she knew who was controlling it. You need to know who your appropriations share is. You need to know who their relationships are. All of these things. So it requires us to be very aware. And I know that that can be very intimidating, but especially in where we are right now, with what's happening at the national level. We can't change the present, but we can certainly prepare for what is coming in the future and how we can shape that. Step one is getting educated. Step two is building on your relationship so you know how to activate what you've learned.
And Miss Ruth, that gave me chills. I can imagine what that was like. I appreciate hearing that. I think on like the day-to-day level for Black girls, it's understanding like who you are and like your journey is enough. And don't compare yourself to other people. My grandma used to always say that comparison is the thief of joy. So whatever is happening in your life, however you are, don't worry about what somebody else is doing. Your journey is your journey. And not to get super religious, but what is for you is for you. And hold on to that. No matter what somebody's trying to tell you you should be doing, you know how you were raised, you know right from wrong. Don't let anybody, as my grandma say, turn you around. On a macro level, definitely I agree with relationships. The one thing that worries me and keeps me up at night is that the further we get away from the civil rights movement, the less and less generations are concerned with like civic engagement and civil rights. Because, Ruby Bridges, who integrated Arkansas school, she's the same age as my mom. She has an Instagram page. So she's alive and well, but our generations don't really understand civic engagement. So I would challenge young people to learn as much history as possible. I'm a history buff. I'm a history nerd. And history is a beautiful thing. You learn so much. It's so interesting. But even if you don't find it interesting and you're not a nerd like me, it is a telltale, and it gives you strength for what's ahead, because our ancestors and the people before us, people say we're not our ancestors. I hate when people say that, because it's not. It's like kind of it's an insult to them. We are just we've taken the baton and we're going forward with it. And I wish we were them. You know what I mean? Because we would have more discipline and would be more in sync with one another. So just, I know it's, things are fancy and social media is cool, but it's so dope to be able to pick up a book and read about, things that our people have gone through in the past, because it shapes you and it makes you understand the present that much more, and have an appreciation. So yeah, so on the micro, just be resolved in who you are, know who you are is enough. On the macro level, stay focused in on to Carlin's point, education, understanding policy inside and out, even if you don't have to like it. Like, nobody's saying like you must love the city budget, you must love history, but do educate yourself on it, because once you're educated, there's nothing that anybody can do or take from you. That's the biggest lesson I learned. I went to prison, a few years ago, and the one thing that they could not take from me, and the one thing that sustains me now, and the one thing that puts money in my pocket is that degree that I earned. So don't let anybody take your education. You get your education, because no matter what happens, people can't take that.
Thank you so much, panelists, for your expertise. Show them some love in the chat. I'm going to pass it over to Auntie Ashley to close us out.
Thank you, Zoe.
Shout out to Auntie Ashley. I like that.
Oh my God. Thank y'all so much. I'm not gonna cry right now. Like I said, I don't know if my makeup's set or not. And so let's give it up for our girls, Zoe and Cherish. Let's give it up. Let's give it up. Show them some love in the chat. Show them some love on YouTube. Show them some love, even if you watch this later on. I cannot be more proud of you two. This is their first time doing something like this, and so this will not be the last. And so hopefully with Girlhood Explained, we can continue to elevate and lift up their voices and create additional leadership opportunities for them. Please do not leave just yet, because we have a few things to wrap up. And I know you guys hate surveys, but I need at least additional 5 minutes of your time. And so can my volunteers please drop the survey link in the chat as I take us through just the last couple of minutes together. Let's see. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. So yes, Zoe Jenkins, thank you so much. Cherish, thank you again so much. Thank you again to all of our panelists, Kelsi, Vanity, Stephanie, Carlin, and Big T, Tamaya Denard. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. I can't thank, this work could not be done without the support of some of our partners. So thank you again for Black Women Cultivating Change. Thank you, Interact for Health, so much for your monetary investment in making this possible. Thank you, Shifted Consulting, ran by Vanity Jenkins. Greenhouse actually did a lot of the branding for us. Black Girl Dad Week is also a partner. Your feedback, like I said, is a gift. If you have a QR code, please scan this. Take 5 minutes to just let us know how we did. We'll be doing this a few more times during the month of March. So please take our survey. We would love to hear from you. Register for our events on girlhoodexplained.com. I'm sure my volunteers will put that in the chat. March 5th at 7 p.m., we're doing a Black Girl Dad panel talking about the role of fathers in advocacy in a young Black girl's life. On March 29th, we're going to really get into it. We're going to talk about STEM. We're going to talk about reproductive health. We're going to talk about leadership and health equity. So please join us. We have an incredible lineup of panelists there as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's actually full-length interviews for those that we couldn't actually add to our panel today. Still have a lot of topics that we won't necessarily get to discuss during the 3.5 hours that we'll be running this series this March. However, we want to create other opportunities and other resources in order to continue the conversation. Please, please, please follow us on LinkedIn. We have some articles that we post, and then on Instagram, we have giveaways happening throughout the month of March as well. This is just the beginning of the conversation again. I know we weren't able to dive into everything as much as we would like, but let's keep showing up for Black girls for today, tomorrow, and beyond. I'll see you guys later. Have a good evening, day. Have a good March. Happy Ramadan to my Muslim folks out there as well.